Welcome to the Calculus B section. In this section we'll be discussing inverse trig functions. So first we'll start off with sine -1x, or arcsine. So we can say that f of x is equal to sine x and g of x is equal to arcsine. So we know that the derivative of g prime of x is equal to 1 over f prime of g of x. So that would give us 1 over cosine sine -1 of x. So we're going to say that f of x is equal to sine -1 of x, or arcsine. Now, we can also say y is equal to arcsine of x, and we know that the inverse of the inverse sine x is going to be sine x. Therefore, we know that we have a couple of identities. We can say that cosine squared y plus sine squared y is equal to 1. This means that cosine y is equal to the square root of 1 minus sine squared y. Now, what's important to note about that is that we can also state that cosine of arcsine x is equal to the square root of 1 minus sine squared y, which would also equal the square root of 1 minus x squared if we substitute it in our arcsine. So this means that the derivative of the arcsine x is going to equal 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. Now, cosine x is going to, the arc cosine x is going to have the similar properties. Everything is the same except cosine x is going to render -1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. Similarly, we're going to say that the inverse of tangent is going to equal 1 over 1 plus x squared. And we're going to move up here and say that the derivative of cotangent is again very similar. All we do is add a -1 over 1 plus x squared. Now, the way I kind of like to remember it is if you add a co, all you're doing is adding a negative. So in the case of secant x, arcsecant x, my apologies, it's going to equal 1 over the absolute value of x, square root x minus 1, and all we're doing for cosecant x is throwing on a negative for that function. Now, that is all the inverse trig functions that you will need to know for Calculus B, and I hope that helps.